To catch up with music expert Sean Brokenshire about the life of legendary musician Johnny Clegg.
He was just so much part of our life, and he seemed constant. But the things he changed. He was unique, and he kept on evolving with the times. And the music evolved with the various bands, Jaluka, Savuka. It got more politically hard-edged. But he was someone who was totally up on the curve. And he was changing, and he was changing us, because he was taking us on a journey.
All right, so how did this boy, born in Lancashire, in the north, east, west of England, end up being this white Zulu boy?
Well, a lot of it had to do with circumstance, because his parents divorced. His mother was from then Rhodesia, and she was actually of Jewish extraction. Her parents had been immigrants from the war. So there were parts of Johnny, there were so many different parts of him. His father was living in England and stayed in England when they divorced, and the family moved down. His stepfather ended up as a journalist, so he encountered the local culture. So he had, first of all, he had all of those influences. He used to say that he lived in 3 African countries on his on his journey, and he did. He even lived in Israel for a few months. So he comes here and he adopts the life of a normal white South African kid. He was 11, and then just whether it was natural curiosity, whether it was because he hadn't been conditioned for 10 years in apartheid South Africa, but he simply didn't think there was anything wrong with walking up to a black guy with a homemade guitar, because he was fascinated. And what are you doing? And I mean, that in itself was a shocking experience for the guy who was playing the guitar, because white boys don't come up to you.
So there are a number of people, I think, that were influential significantly in his life. Long before he met Sipho Mchunu, who we got to know as Jaluka, Charlie Mzila.
Yes.
Tell us about that and how that set the boat on.
I think what the only thing that made Johnny's first little voyage possible was what he was. He was humble, and he was willing to learn. So Charlie took him on almost like a son, and he taught him the ways of the Maskandi. And that's not just the instruments, not how to make your own guitar, but it's also, the Maskandi song is your calling card. It's the story of your life. So you will be playing that guitar, and you'll be singing a long song, one song, a song of a lifetime, saying, I am Johannes, I come from Ladysmith, I've got 2 cows, I work at Crown Mines, I'm looking for a wife. And so as your life develops, so the song of the Maskandi develops. And so that is what Charlie instilled in him. His earlier influences as well were also in dance. Now, how's this for courage for a young boy? He took himself off down to the hostel, and he wanted to learn dancing and stick fighting. And he was prepared to take the knocks.
In the middle of great political upheaval. He just says, I'm going to go do this.
And indeed, I know grown-ups would not dare to do it. But he's just had this insatiable curiosity for people. And he struggled with his own identity to begin with. But then he got to a point where he realized that we all have a shared identity. And suddenly a light bulb went off in his heart and in his mind. And he started telling us that.
We'll talk about his music just now, but I'm also fascinated by his thirst for knowledge of people, because anthropology became this thing, studying Africa and people became this thing, and I think that played in his music as well. Yeah,
that definitely drove him. Their first album as Jaluka, Universal Men, was all about the trials and tribulations of the migrant workers. And so it was a story that he'd encountered these people in the hostels, and it's the story that he wanted to tell their stories. And that's where it started. And this interest in people, he would never flag. He would go. He was the most amazing man to encounter, because he genuinely was interested in you in a humble way, irrespective of who you were. And that grew more and more, because he just realized that people need people. And he was the guy who had to tell white South Africa that.
So there's so much music, and I think everybody's got their song or a few songs that they remember. I remember when I lived in England for a few years. Every time I missed home, I would go to him for some reason. I think he brought me home much more than anybody else. But there was one song for you that changed your life profoundly.
Yes, indeed.
And that was the song Africa. Let's listen to it a little bit.
Africa
So, for some people it was just a popular tune, but it was profound for you. Give us the backstory about this song.
It starts with a slightly jaded high school boy who is faced with the prospect of double history on a Thursday afternoon and learning all about the Great Trek as interpreted by the teachers of the day. And there was the rumor that there was a free concert at the Varsity. So me and my friend, we stole his mother's car and we played truant. And we arrived at Natal University. And I wasn't quite prepared for what I found. You know, I thought I was cool. I thought I was going to pretend to be a student and I was going to meet girls. But I was wearing my school pants and my school shoes and a Hawaii shirt. I mean, who was I kidding? But the fellow audience members were 23 cleaning staff and a few nervous professors. And they weren't even called Jaluka. They were still called Johnny and Zipo. And that was because they were heavily restricted. They weren't allowed to perform at public venues because of the Group Areas Act. So that's why all of the secrecy and all the kind of stuck in the bowels of the university. I arrived there just wanting to have a jaw. At the moment he started playing this song, something just exploded in me. My head just realized that it was in the wrong place. In fact, my head was only seeing a tiny little piece of the sky. And this man was my way to actually find out who I was.